and get involved and become a member of IBW and VFP and just really get exposed to all this. I was raised a military brat, so I was at Fort Hood before I was even in the military. But I joined the National Guard when I was 17. Issues at home and whatnot, and I didn't see any other options. Being a military brat, the military was sort of a fallback plan if if everything else didn't go well enough. And wow. So I joined the National Guard when I was 17, and I turned 18 in basic. And as soon as I got out of basic, I went to Iraq. I was a truck driver, 88 Mike, beep beep, and I turned 19 in Iraq, and I came back, and I had a lot of issues readjusting to being back. So after about 8 months back home, and a little bit of trouble with the law, and this and that and whatnot, I tried to commit suicide. And after that experience, I decided that it was a good idea to volunteer to go back to Iraq because, I don't know, it seemed like a good idea on that bed in the hospital. And so I went back to Iraq, and almost immediately after getting on the ground there, I was like, oh, what the hell did I do? I can't live the rest of my life volunteering to do stuff that I don't agree with and just to try to escape. And so I started journaling and started trying to identify how I had wound up in this place that I clearly didn't want to be, doing things that I clearly didn't agree with. And I don't know that I ever really figured that out, but I did. I did start to notice through a series of events that my experience and the military experience that I thought was pretty common, the way that things seemed to be, was not being represented in the media or in the narrative that gets back to the average citizen and such, and that really upset me. And so I kept journaling, and when I came home, I got depressed again a little bit. But then, with the help of a friend, I got a job at a newspaper, and I was going to change the world with the truth in a military town. And I think that didn't work quite well. But while I was working at that newspaper, one of the reporters from one of the competing papers, I was talking to her about my experiences and how I didn't feel they were represented. I was going to write this book, change the world. And she said, well, I just did this story on this place called Under the Hood. I think you might get along with the folks that are there. And I was in Cove, cleans out of my jurisdiction as far as newspaper stuff went at the time. But I went over there just to check it out for myself. And this was February 2009. And it was the grand opening. Her story was the grand opening story. And so I met Cindy Thomas, who's a code pink person and a military spouse whose husband went through a lot of stuff at the time. And I met some other IVW members there that had been involved in starting the coffee house, largely I think because of bugs that had been planted in their ear by VFP folks, and the movie Sir No Sir no doubt has affected like all of us. And so I really dug it. They were telling the truth about their experiences, the truth as they saw it, without fear of judgment or stigma or any of that stuff. And it was real. And about a week or two later, the Under the Hood invited me to go to Austin for an IVW Winter Soldier panel. And for the same reasons, people telling the truth and sharing their experiences without regard for the stigma or the judgment and such. That really resonated, it floored me. So that's how I came to find Under the Hood, which was opened in February 2009, 5 years this month, which is a big deal. We are less than a mile from the east gate of Fort Hood, and we're about 2 or 3 blocks from where the Leo Strut was. Those of y'all who know, who've seen Sir No Sir, know that an Leo Strut is a helicopter park. It's a shock absorber. And so, the idea behind the name was that this was a place where soldiers, service members, veterans could come and relieve the shock of war to some extent. And I think in a lot of ways, Under the Hood sort of serves to do the same thing and has served to do the same thing. Things have changed over the past 5 years. Early on, it was a lot of actions at the gate and encouraging resistance and supporting COs and stuff. And we still do that, but We've also, worked on bigger campaigns and longer-term sort of vision. And this is a picture from a parade. We've taken to participating. It took us a couple years to get into the Veterans Day parade there. But we get into the Veterans Day parade, and we use that parade to sort of ask questions of the community and start conversations. So you'll see on the banner here, it says, honor all who serve. We had to put that on there because that was the theme of the parade. But we used the theme of the parade to question, what does that mean? Is the way that we treat people who are returning, is the way we treat ourselves and our communities, is that honoring? And so in the back of the truck, I don't know who knows Lori Hurlebaus, but that's her truck there. In the back of the truck there, we have there's a veteran inside that pill bottle. It's a giant construction pill bottle, and this going through the Veterans Day parade, like shaking the cage, and people, man, yeah, whoa, it was powerful. There were people in the audience yelling out their medications, like Prozac, this, that, and there were people starting conversations with each other. We almost didn't even have to hand out any literature because these people they know what the problems are anyway, and so. Engaging the community in those sort of creative ways. But also, we worked with Iraq Veterans Against the War on the Operation Recovery campaign. And, during that time, over 2 summers, we did outreach on post, which is sort of stressful. And I had to cut my hair because nobody wanted to talk to me with long hair. But we gathered over 1,500 pledges from active duty members and family members on base, saying that it was wrong to deploy troops who were traumatized and wrong to deploy troops who were over-medicated. And the idea behind that campaign was if we can stop the deployment of traumatized troops, that's some 60% of the force is on something or another, or has some symptom or another. And so how are you going to fight a war with 30% of what you've got? In addition to those 1,500 names, we also did follow-up interviews with hundreds of soldiers, and we collected really in-depth testimony from a few dozen soldiers, and that's going to be coming out here soon. That work continues now with the release of the Fort Hood report here in a few months, which is a joint effort, IVAW and Under the Hood and the Harvard Clinic for Human Rights. We've also worked with Veterans for Peace and March Forward on campaigns to let service members know that they don't have to deploy to Afghanistan more recently. And from that outreach, there was a CO that came forward, and we helped support that case. We had 2 COs this last year. Last year, Under the Hood had a board overhaul. Now we have a new board from what we've had. And these pictures are real recent, from January, from our board meeting and from an IVAW meeting that followed the weekend after. And hey, Jerry, how you doing? And during this meeting, we did a lot of looking back at how we've affected our community, how we've grown into the community, and we did a little bit of looking forward and thought about the way that change happens in our community. Change happens regardless of anything we do, but we're talking about the sort of change that we want to happen. How does that change happen? And we came to the conclusion that in the past and looking forward, the sort of change that we want to see happen in the Fort Hood community happens when we meet the needs of our community. And when we shift the culture. And some of the ways that we've tried to meet the needs of our community in the past is, GI rights training. We do ribs and rights once a week. Sometimes it's rice and rights. Sometimes it's a potluck and rights, but there's no alliteration in that, so it still gets branded ribs and rights or rice and rights. But that's organizing around a meal and whatever. Telling people, trying to get people informed about discharge upgrades or conscientious objector or the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and what do these issues mean in the community. So some of these other activities that we do also meet the needs of our communities in different facets, but largely, they also shift the culture. Some of these things serve dual. I don't know who's made paper here, but that's sort of something that shifts the culture, but also it can be really beneficial to the person participating in it. So we have that's a VA back paycheck there that I bought the paper studio with, and we make paper there at Under the Hood. out of uniforms, but we also work with the Sustainable Options for Youth, which is like a counter truth recruitment, or whatever the language that you like to use, group down there in Austin. So we make paper out of uniforms and recruiting materials. Also, for the last 3 years, we've been working with the Clean Poetry Slam, which is a group that's existed and used poetry to talk about these issues in various ways for about probably longer than Under the Hood's been there. But we connected with them about 3 years ago. We've been doing monthly poetry there. We also do art shows. A lot of y'all will probably recognize that Just Seeds. Most of those are Just Seeds prints, and Just Seeds was like art portfolio that came out of work with IVW and Just Seeds out of Brooklyn. We've done other art shows as well there.